Hey guys, Dan here with this week's TV news and reviews. We have 6 new shows this week and a bunch of news because most of the networks have now finally given us an idea of what to expect in the fall. They've given us their renewals and cancellations. NBC is the only one that still has not given us a firm take on what their fall might look like. We don't know the status of several of the new freshman NBC shows. Things like Perfect Harmony. Where's that going to be? Bluff City Law finished up its 10-episode run, and they didn't order new episodes, but they still never said it was canceled. So there's a few things up in the air at NBC. But Fox and ABC were among the few remaining networks that we hadn't heard from yet. So let's talk about their renewals and cancellations. Fox has only canceled one show that hasn't already been canceled, and that is Outmatched. They already canceled Almost Family and I think a couple others, but Outmatched was still sort of on the fence. I don't know how, because I didn't think the ratings were very good, and I graded it very poorly. I critically it was not a hit, not just with me, but so I was not surprised to see that is gone. But renewed for at least one more year. The Resident, which is one of my favorite Doctor shows, that's going to be in year 4. Prodigal Son, which was a freshman series that I think seemed like kind of a no-brainer for a pickup because it does very well in the ratings. And then Last Man Standing, which of course jumped from ABC years ago. This is going to be the 9th season overall coming up for Last Man Standing, which I believe is how many seasons Home Improvement got, or maybe not even that many. Maybe Home Improvement only went 8. Either way, that is pretty wild. But it's Fox's top comedy, and I assume they're including in that comedies like The Simpsons and Family Guy. So, but it averages over 8 million viewers a week for Last Man Standing, believe it or not. So that is going to be going as well. Those are the main ones on Fox. Over at ABC, they really clean house with some shows that I like, so that's a bummer. But they renewed officially The Conners. That was sort of a no-brainer. I mean, that is their top comedy now that Modern Family is off the air. Some shows that are getting real long in the tooth. Blackish and The Goldbergs are both coming back for... Goldbergs is season 8. I think Blackish might be the same. Mixed-ish, the spinoff, that was... it's freshman year this past year, but that will be renewed now for year number 2. American Housewife is going into, I think, year 5, believe it or not. And then for the dramas, A Million Little Things, which I couldn't stand more than about 4 episodes of that show. The acting is horrible in A Million Little Things. The Rookie, which I really enjoy, that'll be season 3 coming up. And then freshman series Stumptown will be going into season 2 next year with Colby Smulders. That was a very enjoyable one from when I saw the pilot. And then they've canceled 4 shows. Emergence is the freshman drama that they canceled. And that was one of those where I only saw, the first episode so I could review it here for the show. And I loved it, and I'm definitely going to end up watching the whole season. But I feel like it's one of those that, from what I understand, it could have kind of been just a mini-series, but if they wanted to renew it, they could have. That sort of thing. So hopefully everything gets wrapped up enough at the end of Emergence that we're not left on these major threads. But then other than that, they canceled Single Parents, which I think is an enjoyable show, but it's not like uproarious like some of these other ones. Schooled they canceled, which is kind of a bummer because I liked The Goldbergs, I liked Schooled. So that's done after, I think, 3 years. The first year was only half a year, though. I think maybe 10 episodes. And then Bless This Mess after 2 years, which is a bummer because I love Lake Bell, like Dax Shepard. I have not seen any of the second season, but the first season I watched, it was 6 episodes long, and I really enjoyed it. So that's a shame to see that show get canceled. But then they did pick up 2 pilots that, script-wise, because, of course, most of the pilots were not being able to film before the quarantine hit, or finish filming, I should say. David E. Kelly, he, of course, is a big name with Ally McBeal on The Practice and many, many things. He is going to have a private investigator drama called The Big Sky. And then Kira Sedgwick is going to head up a comedy called Call Your Mother. And that's going to be a multi-camera comedy. And that means, with a studio audience or a laugh track or whatever. So currently The Conners is the only multi-camera show that they have on the air. All the other comedies, I think, right? Yeah, because I mean they had Last Man Standing and they had Dr. Ken for a little while. But yeah, I mean all their shows, everything I just mentioned certainly is multicam, except for the Connors. Yeah, so I mean it'll be interesting, but you know at the same time it'll be nice to have a multi-camera comedy to pair with the Connors in the fall. So that's new over on ABC. But then we've got a bunch of other renewals for you as well. No other cancellations, but for FX and FXX, we've got What We Do in the Shadows for season 3, which I have not yet seen, but I loved the movie. I thought the movie was very clever, very funny. So I'm sure at some point I'll get around to watching the TV show for that. And then Breeders is going in for season 2. That is a show I reviewed just a few weeks ago. Well, I guess now a couple of months ago over on FXX, I think, is where Breeders is. And they're all on Hulu as well for the FX on Hulu, partnership. Gentrified over on Netflix was renewed for season 2. Three Busy Debras over on Adult Swim. I reviewed this and I thought it was okay. The whole Adult Swim thing, it just isn't for me. It tries too hard. It's too much for like stoners. It's too trippy. And I found this show, mildly amusing, but I don't think these Adult Swim shows are something I'm going to keep watching ever. But Amy Poehler produces it, and I love her. I always like to support her stuff. So that's nice. But also, speaking of Adult Swim, so Tuca and Birdie, which is an adult animated show on Netflix that was canceled after one season. I did not ever get to watch that. It premiered a few months before my weekly review show, so it's just something I never got around to. But I like some of the people attached to it, Tiffany Haddish included, and I know people, in my own personal life that really like this show and were sad that it was canceled. So that actually will be going to Adult Swim, speaking of which. So this is only the second time that a Netflix original has been canceled by Netflix and then picked up by a linear network, as they call it. One Day at a Time being the first example, of course, going over to the Pop network, which is kind of a bummer because the new season, the first Pop season of One Day at a Time, got cut in half because of the coronavirus. So I think they filmed maybe 6 episodes or something, or 7, instead of the 13 that they had hoped. But either way, that will be, I'm sure, continuing on Pop next year. But Netflix has a lot of stipulations with their contracts, and a lot of shows are not really able to get around those. One Day at a Time was different in that it was already a Sony property that Netflix basically had to buy, essentially. And then Tuca and Birdie, I don't know what the situation with that is, but obviously they have some sort of interesting contract with Netflix as well, so that will be on Adult Swim. And then daytime-wise, we've got The Bold and the Beautiful going for seasons 34 and 35 on CBS. This is one of just, I think, 3, maybe 4 soap operas left on television. And this does very well. It routinely wins the time slot over on CBS and is second in total viewers, only to CBS counterpart The Young and the Restless, which has already been renewed through 2024. So it's already been renewed 3 more seasons, and that will take it to its 50th year. We talked about that, months ago when they did the renewal for Young and Restless. So Bold and the Beautiful will continue on as well. And then for Freeform, they have renewed Everything's Gonna Be Okay, which I loved, and Motherland, which I did not love. I thought it was okay. I had definitely some problems with it. But what I like about Motherland is that I put these shows up and hope that people enjoy my reviews, hope people enjoy my news, whatever. And these TV news and reviews videos don't get a ton of views compared to some of my other ones. Usually 20, 25 views, not a ton. But Motherland, for some reason, really sparked some conversation on the comments with people, and that's not something that usually happens on my news and reviews shows. I think people watch them, hopefully they enjoy them, but it's not really interactive like the Masked Singer recaps and the Connors reviews and that kind of thing. So it's really cool that this show exists and that clearly has a passionate fan base. And the people that commented were not rude. They weren't like, what are you talking about? You're an idiot. They were just like, well, I think it's this, and I don't think you're giving the show enough credit, and this and that. So, they have respectful fans and apparently a big fan base. So look, that's awesome. I love seeing renewals for shows, even if unless it's like the Kardashians or something. Something that has a good fan base, I always like seeing, even if it's something that's not really for me. And it's not like I gave it a D. I think I gave it somewhere in the C range. I had a lot of issues with it. But, look, it's hard to judge on just one episode. So, who knows, as we go on, maybe, different things are happening in the season as far as that's concerned. But that is renewed for season 2. All right, so those are the renewals and the cancellations I have. But I still have some news to go over. First of all, the biggest news, I guess, probably of the week, in terms of like fanboys, is that Ruby Rose, the lead of Batwoman over on the CW, is leaving before the second season begins. She plays the title character. She is Batwoman, and she's done. So they've not canceled the show. They're still going to be in production with season 2 at some point, of course, once Hollywood reopens. But who is going to be the Batwoman? Who knows right now? And what's interesting is I couldn't really suss out what exactly happened. Both parties, Ruby Rose and the CW / DC Comics / Warner Brothers, whatever, released a statement saying like, we wish Ruby Rose well. It's been great working with her. And her statement was like, this cast and crew is amazing, and like I've had such a great time on this show. Da 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 da. So what happened? My guess is eventually it will come out. But I don't know. Obviously, she wasn't happy, or maybe it was money related, or whatever. But I thought it was weird that I couldn't really, in the couple articles I read about it, there was no mention of like why this is happening. And look, here's another show I thought was very middling. I thought, in fact, it'll be interesting because I'm reviewing a new CW superhero show on this episode called Stargirl. So that will be coming up, in about 20 minutes. But I just think it's interesting that the star of this show is leaving with no real explanation, and they're just going to continue on. The DC Comics universe on the CW is vast. I mean, I would say at least close to, if not half of their, fall regular season product is in the DC universe. I think one of them is off by now. I think is Arrow over, or Green Lantern is over, one of them. But then they have Batwoman and now Stargirl, and then Legends of Tomorrow, I think, is DC, and Arrow, and all of these. They picked up Supergirl from CBS, so they have a good track record with these DC Comics productions. I just think it's interesting. What's funny is one of the things I liked about it, if I'm remembering correctly, was Ruby Rose's performance, but maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know. But I know that I hated they were really pushing the whole like lesbianism and bisexuality in our faces. And as a gay man, I know it's weird to say, but it's the origin of this character. Like we can delve into that kind of stuff. I want to sort of find out how she became Batwoman first, I guess. So I know that was one of my issues with it, but it'll be interesting to see who they pick for the second season of that show. Other than that, let's see. We've got the other, I guess, pretty big news of the week is this was just announced, I think, yesterday. The John Krasinski Some Good News feature on Facebook. I guess they're calling it a show. I mean, I didn't review it here. I didn't really consider it a TV show per se, more of a, hey, we're in quarantine, let's make a video series of this Some Good News stuff. But apparently it's an idea he's had for about a decade, because there's so much negativity in the news that he always kind of, in the back of his mind, wanted to do some sort of uplifting news program. And quarantine just seemed like the perfect time to do that, the perfect fit. So he did, I think, 6 of them, and they all are very, very watched. I think the highest one has something like 17 million views. So, it was a huge success. And more than that, it got a bunch of water cooler type moments. I mean, we're not all in offices anymore, so water cooler moments, is sort of an outdated term, but you know what I mean. There were a lot of things being shared across the internet when he had the whole cast of Hamilton singing, to the sick child, and when he had his office reunion, when he had the prom for seniors that wouldn't be able to attend prom. It really did a lot of good, I think, to uplift people, give people good spirits. But there's a huge backlash with this sale going through, because I think people are calling Krasinski basically a sellout, and you have promoted this as like something I wanted to do for good, not for profit. It was up for free on YouTube and this and that. And it's Krasinski himself in an interview that I read after this merger went through, that he was very hesitant to sell it, because he just wanted to keep it pure and this and that. But it went to CBS Viacom after a big bidding war, and he's not going to host it. He's going to executive produce it, but they haven't figured out who they're going to get to host it. But I think a lot of the charm is going to be lost if this goes on a regular network, or if it's with CBS. Maybe they'll put it up on CBS All Access. I don't know, but the low quality graphics, and his daughters that drew the logo. I mean, like, it was all very homey and very cute and very what we needed in the quarantine. How does that translate to a big budget with some host we don't know? I mean, we might know him. It might be a famous person, but I can't necessarily agree that he's totally selling out. I mean, look, he got his point across. He wanted to make people happy during the quarantine. He has done that. End of story. If he made a bunch of profit afterwards, then okay. But I do believe that it wasn't his intent to make a ton of money off this. I really do believe his intent was, he's bored at home, he's had this idea in his head for a while, let's do this show. So to me, it's not as egregious as a lot of people are thinking, but I really don't think it's going to translate the same at all to a bigger budget format on television or on CBS All Access or whatever. So we'll see how that goes for him. Friends, in a poll about HBO Max, which is launching next week. So I guess my next TV news and reviews video will be, is HBO Max worth it? Because I do all of those when the new systems come. But they did a poll because, of course, they paid a ton of money. I think it was $400 million for the rights to the Friends episodes, to get them off of Netflix and to have them for themselves. Which I think is weird in general, because it's a WB production, and Warner's has some sort of stake in HBO anyway. So I think it's weird they had to pay for the rights, but whatever. The point is that they're going to have this Friends, all the Friends episodes, and they were supposed to have this big reunion of all the cast members in a special to help launch HBO Max, but that got moved with the quarantine stuff. So they're still going to do that. It's going to be part of HBO Max, but it's not going to be there this week when HBO Max launches. So that's a little interesting as well. But there was a survey that Friends is not the main draw for people to get HBO Max, which to me is expected. I mean, you can see Friends on TV 20 times a day still. I mean, Nick at Night, TBS, all the stations still run it. Plus, a lot of people like myself still have the Friends DVDs that they can just watch whenever they want. Friends, look, it's a great show. People love it, and that's fine. But I've always sort of thought the draw of an HBO Max would be to have access to their wealth of exclusive television content that they've curated over the last 30-some years. The Sopranos, Game of Thrones, Sex and the City, The Wire, Oz, the Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David Show, Larry Sanders, actually, speaking of which. So I would always have thought that was sort of the main draw, and here, yes, that is the main draw for a lot of people that were interviewed or, questioned, whatever, polled, I guess you would say. But also, and this is something I didn't think of, but I guess HBO Max is going to have most of, if not the entire, library of HBO original films, which is pretty awesome. I have several of them on DVD. I have like Grey Gardens and You Don't Know Jack and Behind the Candelabra. I have a lot of them that I've liked over the years on DVD, but there's a ton from especially like the 90s that have never really been released on DVD or VHS for that matter, just because, well, they aired sporadically on HBO, so there you go. And I don't know what the difference is going to be with HBO Go and HBO Max, and if you have an HBO subscription on TV, how much do you get with HBO Go? Because I've never had HBO, so I don't know the intricacies of that, but I would imagine that, yeah, having that massive exclusive film library is going to be pretty cool for the HBO Max subscriber as well. So I can see why Friends is not the top draw, but one of the other things that was said in the poll was it polled people that already have other subscriber things that they're paying for, Netflix, Disney Plus, and the Disney Plus subscriber is the most likely to also get HBO Max, with the Netflix subscriber not far behind. And I think it was somewhere in the like 24% range of Netflix users said they would also be subscribing to HBO Max, and some 36 percentage of Disney Plus users said they would get an HBO Max subscription eventually. So those are pretty good numbers. I mean, so HBO should be looking pretty good there. I know Quibi did not work out the way it wanted. I think Apple TV Plus probably at some point will also sort of fall. I just don't think... I think these things need an extreme catalog content. And obviously, you know, Netflix had a huge catalog at the start. It still has, you know, some catalog. Hulu obviously has a massive television catalog. And then Disney Plus, of course, has their own catalog of stuff. You know, Quibi didn't have that. Apple TV Plus didn't have that. CBS All Access did have it, and that's still struggling. So who knows? But I think HBO has enough content between them and Warner Brothers. They also picked up Big Bang Theory, don't forget. So that'll be the exclusive streaming home for that, too. You know, so but the price tag's a lot. You know, it'll be interesting when I do my video for Is It Worth It? Because I don't know. I think it's $15.99 a month or something for HBO Max, which is a lot. I mean, it's like double what most of them are, so that's a lot. All right, and the only other thing I want to say in the news is The Last Dance is finally over at ESPN. I am going to, I think, review this. I don't usually do like docuseries unless it's on Netflix and it's being talked about. Like Tiger King I did. I have one coming up today. Every so often I'll do one if it's big enough. But of course I'm not a sports guy, so it was like 3 episodes in by the time I even heard of The Last Dance. But it broke all these records for ESPN. It doubled almost the previous ratings holder, which was You Don't Know Bo, which they did 8 years ago. And that had almost 4 million viewers on average. This one averages more than 5.5 million viewers per episode, and some of the episodes got as high as like 7 or 8 million. So, you know, for a cable channel documentary, that is insane. So I think now that it's over, I probably will do a review on The Last Dance. I don't know how well I'll enjoy it. I'm not really a sports fan, but I do like Michael Jordan, who doesn't, you know. So I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it and how much I remember from, you know, my college years, because I think it takes place in the 97-98 basketball season mainly. But they're already eyeing, obviously, other things they can do over on ESPN with that in mind, other documentaries. And like we've seen with the Tiger King, like we see with anything that's successful, they're prepping a follow-up, you know, lost episode of The Last Dance as well, to be released, I guess, over the next couple of weeks here. So that is all stuff to look forward to on ESPN. But, all right, let's get into the reviews. We've taken up more than 20 minutes with news. I don't really like to do that, but there was a lot to talk about. So we've got 6 TV shows to talk about today. The first is Snowpiercer. This is a much storied show, even from the get-go. Like before it even aired, it had so many lives. It's been prepping now for over 3 years. It was originally on TNT, and then they moved it to TBS for a little bit, and then TNT got it back. And they're all owned by the same company, so it's not like it was being bought by other people, but they just were trying to figure out where to best put it. And so here we go. It ended up back on TNT, but even then there was a bunch of production problems and whatever. But what we've got now is a guaranteed second season before the first season even aired. So there's going to be at least 20 episodes of this show, Snowpiercer. But in addition to that, it was the highest rated new show on TNT in a couple of years. It got almost 4 million viewers from that pilot episode. And it did air on TBS later that night, too. And then TNT aired it again. So TNT aired it twice that one night, and then TBS aired it too. I don't think TBS is going to air any of the other episodes. I think just that pilot. But if the name sounds familiar, it is taken from a movie by Bong Joon-ho, who just won an Oscar for Parasite. But it's also, really, both of these are taken from a book from back in 1982, a French novel, a graphic novel, actually. And so the movie followed a little bit closer to the book than the show does. The show sort of deviates a good bit from certainly the movie, but from the book a little bit. I mean, from what I've read, I didn't read the graphic novel, but I did see the movie years ago and loved it. I mean, I gave it either an A or an A-. Chris Evans is the star of that, and it was just a great time. Very, very well done, before I even knew who Bong Joon-ho was. So when I found out Parasite was by him, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that movie, Snowpiercer, was awesome. And so here, they basically, the premise is that there's this train of 1,001 cars, and the world has become a frozen wasteland, so everybody pretty much has gone on to this train that just basically circles, the globe here, or whatever, and it is known as the Snowpiercer. I guess it can't circle the globe. Well, maybe it could, I guess, if everything's frozen. I don't know. Anyway, but this version stars Daveed Diggs, who I freaking love. Like, I don't know much about Hamilton. I didn't really, see him in Hamilton, but I saw him, like, pop up in a few things. Like, he was the teacher in Wonder that I really liked, and he had a recurring role on Blackish that was funny. But then he wrote and produced this movie Blind Spotting that he starred in a couple years ago that I gave an A+ to. Loved it, one of my favorites of the year for sure. And then he also shows up in Undone on Amazon, which I gave the first season an A+. He doesn't have a starring role in that, but he's in almost all the episodes. It's, a supporting role, you could say. So I love this guy. I mean, he for me is just on fire, and I think his career is really just getting started. I think we will see so many great things from Daveed Diggs. I'm really excited to see where he goes from here, but he's basically the star of it. And one of the differences from the movie to the show is the time between the world freezing over and us, the audience, in this storyline. So the movie had it at like 17 years. This has it at 7 years since the world froze over, which means that a lot of the, like kids and teenagers on the train remember what the real world used to be like. So, and it's also a little bit less time for these, tailies, they're called, which is like the poor people, to be beaten down and that kind of thing. So, that's one big difference. And then the other big difference is, look, that was a 2-hour and 10-minute whatever movie. And here they've got, well, at least 20 episodes since it's been renewed already for season 2. So even when you cut out commercials, it's still about 16 or 17 hours that they're going to have to fill. So this show takes a whole like murder mystery aspect to it that the movie did not have. The movie was all about the uprising of the tail section, the tailies, which I, of course, always think of Lost for the tailies, but it's very possible Lost got it from the original graphic novel, so I can't really say much about that. I don't know which came... I mean, obviously the graphic novel came first, but I don't know if they were referred to as tailies in the graphic novel. But I always think of Lost when I hear the tailies. But either way, this doesn't quite take an uprising stance at this point. I mean, there's some murmurings about it in the pilot episode, but but it's more about this murder mystery that the higher-ups involve Daveed Diggs' character in trying to find, because he was a detective in the real world, before Snowpiercer happened. But Jennifer Connelly is in this as well. I always love seeing her. Mike O'Malley. So there's some people that I really enjoy watching on here. So let's talk about my review of it in general. Now, what I've been trying to do lately is see the first 2 episodes of a lot of these shows to get a more well-rounded take on it. But this airs on Sunday nights, so only the first episode has been up so far. So I have to base it on the first episode, and I freaking love it. It is not the same as the movie. Yes, it's true. But both entities are great. I mean, first of all, the concept is just great. It's a cool concept, no pun intended. That there are many possibilities to explore within, and so here in some of the scene changes, we see blueprints of different cars and different things within the train. I think that's interesting. I think the murder mystery element was interesting. The acting here is top notch, and it really feels like the budget for this show is top notch as well. I think, look, for 3 years in the making, I think TNT poured a bunch of money into this, and it shows, because it is just shot so well. It doesn't look like a TV show. And I watch a lot of sort of action drama type TV shows like The Rookie or 911, and they all look good, but they look like TV shows. This definitely has a film feel to it. And then there's this really great violent scene with the fighting, and the way that was shot was really cool. And I talked, was it just last week, about a show that had really great choreographed violence. Oh no, it was the Mark Wahlberg movie, actually, on Netflix, Extraction. And this is maybe not quite on par with that, but the way it's shot, and the attitudes of everybody, and the script at that moment was just, it was very powerful. But I like the way, his character comes back from his meeting with the higher-ups, and, the Tailies are kind of like, well, you're not with us anymore, you're against us, you're a traitor, this and that. And he's trying to explain to them, no, like, if I help them with this, like, it's going to be tit for tat kind of thing, and this is going to be good for all of us kind of thing, and they don't really believe him. And so the storyline, even though it isn't at this point much like the movie Snowpiercer, I really like the direction they're going with it. And look, it makes sense, because that was a 2-hour movie. Like, if we're going to stretch it into a whole season or 2 at minimum, then I would like there to be something more to it than just, okay, we're going to have the uprising for 20 episodes. That would be boring. So I'm really glad that they decided to go a different way with it. I am pumped to find out what happens on the Snowpiercer, if we're going to meet some of the real higher-ups, including, is it Mr. Wilton, the main, person here, the president or whatever, I guess, I don't know. But I thought this first episode was great. I'm very excited to see what happens next with Snowpiercer, and I give it an A. Definitely one of the best things I've seen this year so far. Next up, we have Stargirl. This is over on, first it's on DC Universe, the streaming app, and then the next day it will be available over the television on the CW. So, which, I don't know if that was always the plan, or if because of the shutdown of Hollywood and networks are sort of grasping at getting other properties and stuff, I don't know if that was because of that. I mean, it would make sense, though, for it to be part of the plan, because it really is very television friendly, as opposed to a lot of stuff on DC Universe, like the Harley Quinn animated series, which is very adult. So, look, it makes sense. But I got a little confused at first, because I just reviewed a movie called Stargirl over on Disney+, but this has nothing to do with that. This is basically this girl who So the Justice Society of America, which featured her stepfather, played by Luke Wilson, ends, and about 10 years later is where we are now in the story. And Courtney Whitmore is the name of who becomes Stargirl. She's played here by someone I don't know, but she did a great job, Breck Bassinger. And I don't think she's, let me look, I don't think she's any relation to Kim Basinger. I don't even know if it's spelled the same way. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. But she's only 20 years old, so she's believable as a high school sophomore. And basically, there have been other Stargirls on television, like including in Smallville and stuff. And Basinger said she purposely did not look at any of that stuff to give the character, her own kind of flavor. But yeah, so Luke Wilson plays her stepdad slash Stripe, which is the former sidekick to Starman, which we do meet Starman in the first scene. It's he's played by Joel McHale. I don't know if Joel McHale will recur. Spoiler alert, he dies in the first scene of the show, so I don't know if we'll see him in flashbacks moving forward or what, but she's digging up some things in the basement and sees some news clippings and stuff showing her father or her stepfather, and she's like, okay, what's going on here? So she discovers this powerful staff known as the Cosmic Staff, and sort of is trying to use it to her advantage to stop some bullies and this and that and the other thing. But her dad has to explain to her, okay, like, this thing's very powerful, like, you don't quite know what you're getting into yet, da-da-da-da-da. So here again, I only was able to watch the first episode of this because it will be on, I think it's Sunday nights on DC Universe and then Mondays on the CW, or maybe the following day after that. I don't remember, but either way, I'll put it up in the title here when I give my grade. But either way, I was only able to watch the first episode of this too. So origin episodes for superheroes are hard because they have to cram a lot in, especially when it's somebody you don't know. When it's the 8th origin of Spider-Man, you get it. When it's the 8th origin of Batman, you get it. But Stargirl, I don't know. I didn't watch Smallville. I didn't watch some of these other things that Stargirl has been involved with. What stands out to me here the most is that the effects are pretty good. For a TV show, the effects are pretty solid. I didn't quite feel that way in the first scene with Starman, but as the episode went on, I thought the graphics were pretty cool. She's a really good actress, this Breck Bassinger, and I like Luke Wilson anyway, so he does a good job. Amy Smart plays the mom, by the way. She's good too. So far, though, I don't know anything about these characters. I know nothing. They focus so much on who the superhero counterparts were in the past, because, of course, they had to build that up to get to the present day, that I don't feel yet that I have any sort of clue who this person is. And as she discovers Stargirl, I don't think she really knows quite what that means either. So I didn't really get a good sense of who Stargirl is, or who the regular Courtney, is it Courtney Whitmore, who she is either. So I think that's a problem. And because there are so many superhero shows, especially of the DC nature, on the CW that are all, especially like the origins are all kind of similar, it really kind of is going to get lost, I think, in the pack of averageness with that. But as a standalone show, like if the other shows didn't exist and this was like one of the first DC Universe shows, I think I would like it more because, for one thing, unlike a lot of things on the CW, I think this is pretty family friendly. I mean, I think it helps that she's in high school. So in that sense, it's maybe a little more Riverdale than it is Batwoman, for example. But I think this is a pretty family-friendly show if you're looking for some action. There's a little bit of humor maybe in it, but, none of the characters I really know yet, so it's hard to give a grade based on that. But for a pilot episode, for an origin story episode, I didn't think it was that bad. I thought it was a nice touch having Joel McHale be Starman from 10 years ago, because then it's like, I mean, I like Joel McHale. I think he's kind of love him or hate him, so if you don't like him, then it won't be for you. But I do like him. So I thought he added some humor into it, especially when they were talking about who's going to carry on the torch, as he's dying, and he's like, well, it's, somebody will rise up and do it. Not you, won't be you, but somebody will, and I thought that was funny. So I liked Stargirl, and it's one of the better things I've seen in terms of the DC Comics universe on the CW. So I'm actually going to leave the TV show Stargirl with a B+. I really enjoyed it. So up next is Solar Opposites. This is over on Hulu. We have 2 Hulu shows to talk about. Solar Opposites, the first one. And essentially, it's an adult animated series. It's a family of aliens from a much, much better world than Earth who have to take on Middle America and can't really agree whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. We've got some familiar voices here. Sean Jambrone, I think is his name. He plays the lead on The Goldbergs, and he plays one of the kids here, Yumulak. But Thomas Middleditch from Silicon Valley plays Terry. And we have a few people recurring that I have not seen yet. Tiffany Haddish and Alfred Molina, Christine Hendricks. So this one I was able to watch 2 episodes of, and it is Hulu, so all the episodes are up now. There's 8 total. And this was created by Justin Rowland and Mike McMahon, who Justin is the co-creator of Rick and Morty. And look, I will freely admit I don't like Rick and Morty, but I've never really given it a chance. I watched part of the first episode once. I thought it was very annoying. But then the culture surrounding Rick and Morty and the fan base of Rick and Morty makes me want to just throttle all of them. So I just have never really given Rick and Morty a chance. And I've been told to by several different people whose opinions I respect about that kind of thing. So maybe at some point I will watch it and I will try to keep an open mind about it, knowing that the fan base is so stupid. But stupid as in annoying. I'm sure they're intelligent people because I hear it's a very, very layered show and well written. So okay, but going into Solar Opposites, I was like, all right, this isn't Rick and Morty, even though it's from the same guy, so I'm going to really keep an open mind. And one of the things I found most interesting is this was actually developed for Fox as part of, I guess, their Sunday night lineup. They ended up passing on it, and that's how it came to Hulu. And it's definitely curse-filled, so I imagine, which is easy to, change on an animated show. I do generally have a problem when things are too curse-laden, too adult, when they don't really need to be. It's a big problem on Netflix, and Hulu is getting there too. If this was developed for Fox, and I don't know if it was all shot for Fox or not. I don't know if it was just developed and then went to Hulu, but either way, this could be a pretty PG-13 rated show, but it ends up being R-rated because they swear a lot, and there's a lot of real gross out things that happen. But it is very funny. It reminds me a lot of Third Rock from the Sun, actually, with the way that the aliens are sort of trying to, ingratiate themselves with the culture. In one of the episodes I watched, 2 of the members go to the club to, find this little creature they created from a television show because they were sad to find out he wasn't real, so they created a version of him in their lab in the basement. And so meanwhile, the kids are sort of taking people hostage and miniaturizing them, and they keep them in a shelf in their room. So it's a lot of tropes that we've seen before with alien sort of permeating Earth culture, but I think it's pretty funny. It's done very well, and it's definitely clever. I can see if Rick and Morty has this same sense of humor, I could see how people would like that show. But I think this is even higher rated, from critics. I don't usually look at what specific critics say, but I'll usually look at the Rotten Tomatoes score of something. Just to see if I'm kind of, am I in line with other critics? Am I thinking this is really good, but it's horrible? I don't know. But I believe this one even has higher ratings than Rick and Morty. Which I think I've always gotten the sense that Rick and Morty is very random and they'll have these Family Guy sort of jokes where it's total non sequiturs and whatever. And that to me is always kind of lazy. But this didn't really seem to have a lot of that. It had a weird tone to it, but it's very funny. I mean, the jokes really stand up. So yeah, I guess we should move on, because I try to keep these under about 45, 50 minutes, and we're already to that point. So, but I really enjoyed Solar Opposites. I leave that with a B+. So a bunch of good shows this week so far. So let's get to The Great. This is on Hulu as well. This is very, very loosely based on Catherine the Great. And the full name for this is The Great, An Occasionally True Story. And I really like that about it, because it is a tongue-in-cheek approach. It is very, very satirical and funny. And Catherine the Great here is played by Elle Fanning. Nicholas Hoult plays Peter III of Russia. And I just saw Nicholas Hoult in that movie about the Kelly gang. I always like seeing him pop up, because he's really good. But Elle Fanning, boy, I'm a fan. I think, no pun intended, I think she, ever since, I think the first time I saw her was maybe Super 8. And I mean, Dakota Fanning was fine, but Elle to me is the better actress. I think she is definitely, she tackles her material better, and I think she picks more challenging projects too, which I guess makes sense, because Dakota sort of petered out, I think, when she was a bit younger, and Elle got her start, I think, a little later. So I mean, it makes sense. But I've always liked Elle Fanning, and this show is very funny. I mean, it's everything kind of that the premise lives up to. It is funny. It is satirical. It's definitely too gross. I mean, there's parts where they're gouging out dead people's eyes and stuff. It's definitely mature audiences, gross, lot of language, a lot of sex talk, tons of sex talk. Peter, is it Peter the Great? Peter the Third is obsessed with sex and talking about how big his member is, and talking about how this guy hasn't gotten laid, this guy hasn't done this, and whatever. And he talks to her all the time about sex, and he uses her for sex, and he look. But it is satirical, so it's sort of poking fun at how this really was the norm back then. This was the culture, and it's ridiculous, but here it is, And this reminded me a lot of the movie The Favorite. And because the reason it reminded me a lot is because I don't typically like a lot of this sort of era, like the royalty and of hundreds of years ago. I find it to be mostly kind of boring. Like Downton Abbey, I never got into. I've talked about that several times on the show. But there's some that occasionally I like, and I loved the movie The Favorite. And I was like, this really reminds me a lot about The Favorite. So towards the end of the second episode, I pulled up some of the stats of this show, and Tony McNamara was the screenwriter of The Favorite, and he's also the creator and the writer of this. So I was like, yep, that totally makes sense. The tone is pretty much the same. So I'm going to say, if you like the movie The Favorite, this is right in the wheelhouse. This is a series version of The Favorite, just focusing on different royals, basically. But a lot of the same beats are taken, a lot of the same things are discussed, and I don't mean in a retread type way. It is all pretty fresh, but it definitely goes steps and steps further from what the movie did in terms of the language, the gross out factor, and the sex talk, I guess, too. But I really liked this a lot. I leave The Great, An Occasionally True Story with a B+ as well. A lot of B+ shows today, so let's see what we have next. 2 over on Netflix. First up is White Lines. This is a mystery show, a mystery thriller, I guess it's referred to, and it's created by Alex Pena. It has 10 episodes right now up on Netflix. And a bunch of people I really don't know. I can't really name the people in the cast, so I will tell you who plays who, but they're not people I recognize, really. But Laura Haddock is sort of the lead, Zoe Walker. Her brother Axel is found dead about 20 years after going missing while being a DJ in Ibiza. So she goes to Ibiza herself to investigate, and that's where the show generally takes place. And so through some detective work and some phone calls and meeting with people, she's trying to figure out what exactly happened to her brother. The show also features Nuno Lopez and Marta Milians as Kika. But yeah, so it's a bunch of people I don't know, and it's mostly in English, but I would say it's probably maybe 25% to a third in Spanish. So, you definitely... I like to have the subtitles on Netflix anyway, so even when it's in English, I can understand what people are saying, but it's definitely important at times like this, because even the British accents are really thick in this too. So even it's almost Cockney. So it's nice to have the captions on for this whole show. But then of course, when the Spanish comes up, I'm sure the captions would come up for the Spanish parts anyway, even if you didn't have the caption on. But I would recommend having it on anyway because of the heavy, thick British accents. So this show reminded me a lot of one that Netflix also just premiered maybe like a month and a half ago, not even, called Outer Banks, that I reviewed pretty favorably here. I think it was in the B range. It reminds me a lot of that in the sense that, like, I am not familiar with any of these people. It's all sort of new actors and actresses, and they're investigating a murder, and in Outer Banks, it's more the detectives that are investigating, and here it's just sort of real people that are taking on the role of detective for themselves, that are doing the digging. But I really thought this was a lot more middling than Outer Banks. For one thing, I didn't really find it to be that interesting. I thought it moved very slowly. Outer Banks really got you right into the thick of things with that first episode. And here again, I watched 2 episodes of this, and I think, what did I say? There's 10 total. So I watched the first 2 out of 10, and I still didn't really find myself that invested in the story. I thought there were stretches where I was just kind of bored, or she was sort of interviewing people, and I was just like, well, none of these people are necessarily likable. I am a little bit curious, I suppose, as to what's happening with her brother and how he died. And I will say, because it was shot in Ibiza, it is gorgeous to look at. I can't deny that. But I think there's a lot of shows in that vein too, like Magnum P.I., well, that's a detective show too, and that's shot in Hawaii, so that looks real gorgeous too sometimes. So I can't say that is, a huge plus for a show, but it doesn't hurt it, when a show is beautiful to look at, and the people are all beautiful as well, of course. Why wouldn't they be? And some of the stuff about, because he was a DJ, like some of the people that she's talking to, like at the club and stuff like that, interest me a little bit, and but overall, I definitely thought this was more boring than Outer Banks, absolutely. But it reminded me a lot of that show. So if you like that whole mystery vibe and theme, this might be one to watch. But, again, like the kids in the Outer Banks, and I say kids, they're probably in their 20s, but they're better actors. Even though there's unknown people in both shows, the acting is better in Outer Banks. Like, this is basically, to me, Outer Banks is redheaded stepchild, off in the corner. It's not horrible, but it's not something I think I want to stick with. I don't really care that much about the mystery at the center of this to continue watching it. So I leave White Lines with a C. And then finally, we have also on Netflix a docu-series called Trial by Media. I don't know if this is going to be ongoing or if it's just sort of a one and done, but there's 6 episodes, and each one tackles I think there's 6. There might be 8, but no, I think there's 6. Each one tackles a different media story, crime story, that was spun in a different direction than maybe the public could have been led because of the media. So the 2 I watched, the first one is about the Jenny Jones guest murdering the other guest when he found out he had a secret crush on him back in the mid-90s, which I remember very vividly. So I think I had a different take on this episode than I might have if I didn't know the story. So that's why I especially wanted to do 2 episodes on this, because I wanted to see how it would fare with something I was less familiar with. And I was right to do that, because episode 2 is The Subway Killer from 1984. I was a kid. I remember hearing about it, and I remembered the name of the guy attached to it, but it wasn't anything that I knew that much about, certainly in this day and age. So, so with that, I had sort of a different reaction to the second episode than I did to the first episode, because the first episode to me just seemed like all stuff I already knew about, you know. And I know there's one coming up. I think it's the episode 6, the last one, about Rob Blagojevich, and I really didn't want to watch that one because I followed that whole story when it was happening. So I definitely find it more interesting if you're going in it without knowing what was going on, because the episode about the Jenny Jones show just kind of seemed like, you know, interviews I had already kind of seen and people I already sort of knew about, and I knew the story, so there were just no surprises in that one. So with episode 2, I definitely felt more like, okay, this is more, to me, investigative journalism. But what I found odd is that for a show called Trial by Media, where they're really hammering home the idea that media spins things and this and that and the other thing, they didn't really focus as much on the media's place in all of this as I was expecting. It was more just like, okay, here's the facts, here's what happened, here's some interview clips. And they do interview people that were part of it. Like they interview lawyers that were part of the original trial, or the prosecutors or the judge. Or, well, I guess they don't interview the judges, but the show clips of the judges anyway, or they'll show video of the original police interview, or whatever. So that kind of stuff is interesting, and I definitely think it's an interesting show. I just don't think it goes nearly to the point that I thought it was designed to make, which is how the media spins things. So, and you definitely, I think, come out thinking one way about each case. It is spun in itself by the show for you to definitely have one opinion of who's right and who's wrong at the end of the show. The Jenny Jones case, I think, is a little less cut and dry about who's at fault. But the subway killer case was more like, they were showing us how the media made a hero out of this guy, and turns out maybe he wasn't a hero and he's not a hero, and here's why. But again, it's this show leading you down that path. I also thought of the movie Richard Jewell, which was a recent Clint Eastwood movie about sort of a hero that the news hailed as a hero, but then just as quickly they hailed him as the bomber, which he wasn't. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting show. It's some interesting viewpoints, but I think it sort of misses the mark in really hitting home the media's spin in all of this at the end of the day. So for that, I can't grade it too highly, but I certainly found it interesting. I do like the documentary style of it. I thought they got really interesting people to interview that were right there on the front lines of the story, so I thought that was cool as well. So I will leave Trial by Media with a B. So mostly good ones this week. That one C for White Lines, I don't recommend that, but the other ones, and they're all different too, so depending on your tastes, you may enjoy one or two of them, but not the others. But I gave you a nice sort of mix there. But I have rambled on too long, and these shows used to all be about an hour, my TV news and reviews. But that was before quarantine, when I was making a video every single day, so I try to keep these to like 45, 50 minutes, but you know what, there was a lot to talk about this week, so, and I really rushed through those last like 3 shows too, so, but either way, thank you for watching. Please comment below if you have any thoughts on these shows or this review, and that's it, that'll do it. I think, if I'm right, that HBO Max goes up this coming week, then my next TV news and reviews will be a HBO Max Is It Worth It review. If I'm wrong, well, there's a ton of shows that have just dropped in the last couple weeks that I'll have to review for you, including Sweet Magnolia on Netflix, and Space Force is coming out on Netflix as well in a couple days, which will be exciting. But anyway, that'll do it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.